And now I'm going to move over to, and I just wanted to mention, I'm an attorney, and my specialty is basically labor law, employment law, healthcare, education, that kind of delve in that kind of thing. And then, of course, jack of all trades for the Americans with Disabilities Act, since I'm the lead technical assistance provider for the Southwest ADA Center. So I'm in charge of 2 other people who provide technical assistance on the ADA. Any questions you have about the ADA, whether it's about architectural accessibility, employment discrimination, public services discrimination, education, both K through 12, as well as post-secondary, we answer all those types of questions. We offer a confidential calling service. You can call the 800 number, or just go to southwestada.org, do a little bit of research. You can call us then, or submit your question in writing. So we kind of handle all kinds of ADA questions. So this is really exciting for me to come in and moderate today. I'm happy not to be under the spotlight for a change. And we're going to be taking questions. So I'm going to get to our panelists right away. So we have, I'm just going to name their first name, and I'll let them introduce themselves and say a little bit about themselves. So I will start with Perla.
Can you guys hear me? I'm going to take off my mask. You guys can hear me better. 1 second. Okay. So, hi everyone. Like I mentioned, my name is Perla. I am a current student here at the University of Houston. I am a sophomore. My major is teaching and learning. I am getting certified in early childhood education through 6th grade. I'm doing the bilingual journalist track because, well, I just speak Spanish. If you can, pick up on the accent. I'm originally from Mexico. I've been here for about 9 years. I call Houston my home, so, well, that's why I decided to come to UH in the first place. They told me to tell you a little bit about myself. Well, as you guys can tell, I have albinism. I also have low vision impairment. Like Diego mentioned, maybe if I cannot make direct eye contact with you guys, it's because, well, it's super bright up here. And I'm really nervous right now. And when I'm nervous, I tend to not make eye contact with anyone. So please, I apologize beforehand. Comfortable coming into their role as an ambassador. I make socials for them, banquets, you name it, just fun stuff for them to get to know each other in and outside of the workplace. And as of right now, I'm loving my job, and I want to thank those who made it possible for me to get that job. University Career Services, they helped me a lot. TWC, well, they helped me get here to college, so thank you so much for that. And I'm just happy to be here. Go Cougs!
Thank you, Verla. Cornelius Booker.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me okay? All right, I'll just do this. Can y'all hear me okay now? All right, great. Again, my name is Cornelius Booker, and I'm an equal opportunity specialist with NASA. If I start moving this mic, maybe I can. Okay. And I'm an equal opportunity specialist with NASA. I've been with NASA now for a whopping 6 months, and it's been a great opportunity. And my role is to ensure that people who apply at NASA and people who work at NASA does not have to deal with discrimination in any way. So I deal with discrimination in EO complaints. And also I've been with I was with Workforce Solutions for over 11 years as a regional navigator, along with SOHA, and working with a great regional team. So I'm excited to be here. And to go in a little bit about me, I've been in the wheelchair. I'm a wheelchair user. I've been in a wheelchair since I was 17 years old. And having to deal with the challenges of being a wheelchair user, I understand the challenges that people face with all types of disabilities, especially those who use wheelchairs. And I know how to overcome those challenges because I had to do that myself. And a little bit about me on a personal note. I consider myself a visionary because being a visionary means you have to be creative and see things differently, using knowledge, experience, or wisdom. And I had to do that throughout my career, throughout my search for the right opportunity when it comes to employment. And so I know how to jump over hurdles, per se. No pun intended, but I can do that if I need to. But I know how to address the elephant in the wall and make it seem like my disability isn't a disability. And I'll give you more information about that later. And another fun fact is about me is I'm a stand-up comedian. That's a whole nother thing, but but I enjoy the opportunity to make people laugh. So that's another thing that we can talk about later. So that's all I got. Go ahead, Diego.
Marina,
So
I hope I
those are-
pronounced that right.
Yeah, you got it. This is very tough acts to follow. Perla is a morale coordinator, and we got a stand-up comedian, and then you have me, right? So my name is Marina Guerra. I'm with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission here in Houston, Texas. I am not originally from Houston, but I got here as quickly as I could, right? As they say, I'm originally from Corpus Christi, Texas, so I'm a Texan. Unfortunately, didn't go to U of H. I went to Corpus Christi A&M. I'm an Islander, but I support every local organization, so go Cougs. But a little bit about myself, I don't have a lot of fun facts, unfortunately. I am from the government, so not a lot of fun, but good purpose, right? So I am here for, just to let employers, and employees know about roles and responsibilities in the workplace. So if you don't know, EEOC is a federal government agency that handles claims of discrimination in the workplace. So when an individual believes that based on their race, religion, color, sex, national origin, age, or disability, that they've been discriminated against, we're the agency that you come to. We're free. We investigate the claims, try to remedy those situations. My job now, I've been with the agency for 23 years. I just colored my hair, so you can't see the gray hair anymore, but there was a lot of gray hair before. It's a tough job, but so in those years I worked as an investigator, supervisor, and more recently in this outreach and education role to let the public know, here we are, these are the things that we do, and these are the services that we can provide. We're neutral, so I get a lot of calls from employees. I also get a lot of calls from employers trying to do the right thing, so we're always willing to help. Don't have any fun facts about me, but I'll come up with something before the end of the session.
Thank you. So we'll jump right in, and I think the questions they're pretty general, and they kind of cover different things. So one of the questions that I have is about the experience of looking for a job and applying and so forth, so the application process. And I guess the question that they put on my list here is, what's that experience like for you when you were looking for work, for employment? And I'm guessing that probably tends to relate to people having a disability and so forth, but I'm kind of glad that we kind of have a cross-section of different people up here, no doubt, with very different experiences. So without taking too much time, I'll just pose that question. What was the experience like? Were there any challenges, I guess disability-related challenges? And so let's start with Cornelius.
All right, great. Thank you, Diego. Some of the major challenges that I had to face when it comes to doing a job search was, first of all, getting people to recognize that my disability isn't hindering me from doing the job. So oftentimes when I don't disclose my disability in any way before I get to the job, because I don't want to request an accommodation, because I don't think I need one. When I apply for a job and I show up for the interview, I like to see their face when I show up in the wheelchair, and they're like, oh man, okay, I didn't know. We don't have to bring the interview downstairs. And I want to see how well they can accommodate me at that moment. if they're not willing to make the accommodation, maybe that's not the job for me. So I often, just try to show up and see what are you going to do. I don't want you to think that I'm not prepared for the job or that I can't do the job based on my disability. So you would never know I have a disability. But if you think I'm good enough to set me up for an interview, I want you to be good enough, be happy enough to allow me to do the job that you want me to do. So I never talk about my disability during the interview process. I never tell them that I can't do anything. The word that I can't do anything is never discussed in the interview in any way. Even if they ask me, what are your challenges or what problems that you had in the past with a previous employer? I never talk about anything negative during my interview. I always talk about the good stuff, what I can do, what I'm great at, how I've overcome challenges, and how I can be successful at the job. So I try to make sure that my disability is not a factor and that I'm focusing purely on the skills that the employer is looking for and how I can do the job better than anybody else that I interview. I like to brag about myself that I can do the job better than anybody else that you're going to interview today. So when they think about it later on, like, that dude in that wheelchair was really good. Yeah, because I know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to apply for a job that I don't think I can do. And when I'm doing my research, I'm make sure that, I know probably more about the job than the person who was interviewing me for the job. So when I get to the point that, hey, I want to talk more about this job, you're going to just highlight, this guy really knows what he's talking about. And that's what I want you to think about. Don't think about my disability, but think about how good I might be in that position that you're interviewing me for. So.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to that, what you said, Cornelius, that it's amazing what you can find on Google. I mean, if you're not sure about something, like a job, like Cornelius says, look it up. Chances are you're probably going to find some description of it someplace. It may not be exactly the same wording, but you're going to get a great idea of what it's going to be all about when you go there for the interview. Because I'm telling you that recruiters love asking those little tricky questions. I'm just going to use that metaphor to keep it kind of lighthearted. Like what challenges have you had in your previous job? That will come up, and you got to be prepared to answer that kind of a question. So let me kind of ask the same type of question, what your experience was like to Marina.
So I don't have a disability at this moment, right? That's one of those statutes that EEOC investigates that could change, right? My age changes, disability could change. But I will say what I've seen, right? So being with the agency for 23 years, what I notice in disability, especially in hiring cases, is that people don't know going in how much is too much for the individual to ask. What should I disclose and at what point should I disclose it? And so all of the, as Cornelia said, do your research, find out about the job, but also if you're not sure about the laws and what they should be asking and how much should they ask and how much is too much, make sure you know that going into these jobs. Because what I find in investigations is that the individuals weren't sure that was too much, and then how do I approach that question? Should I answer the question? I don't want to, mess up the interview. So knowing roles, knowing responsibilities, and that's what I'm hoping today that I can share with you. And then once you get into the position, right? At what point can they ask me more questions? Can they delve further into my background, my medical history? There's always a point where it's too much information.
Mm-hmm.
And Perla, I'd like to ask you kind of the same type of question, basically what your experience is like when you're looking for a job, kind of in general, what you run into.
Well, so when I was first applying for a job, I applied through Cougar Pathway. I submitted my resume, got it approved, and after that, I just began to apply. When I applied for the UH Ambassadors by mistake. Like I mentioned, I have low vision. I was trying to apply to orientation team, but I applied to UH Ambassadors, and I don't regret it. They're wonderful, both O team and I call them the A team, the ambassadors, but it's fine. But when I first applied, there was a question towards the end, is there any comments that you would like to leave? I left it blank, actually. Like Cornelius mentioned, I didn't really say anything. With my disability, it's visible. So they're gonna see it, like Cornelius as well. They're gonna see it when I go to their the interview. My interview was online, and I'm scared of like cameras and all of that. So I'm like, they're gonna see me anyways. So I'll just wait. When I was there, I was interviewed by another student, and so what she first asked me is like, is there any way I can accommodate you? Do you need me to make like the text, like the font bigger? Do you need me to change like the color of the font? Anything like, that she was having some sort of presentation and like telling me information about the youth ambassadors. I'm like, no, it's totally fine. I appreciated the fact that, she wanted to accommodate me, and she was really nervous. She didn't know how to approach the subject. So I'm like, no, you're totally fine. I answered the questions he had for me. I asked questions. That's a big advice I give to you guys who are seeking a job. Just ask questions. There's never enough questions. And towards the end of the interview, I asked her like 20 questions, I think, maybe more. And at some point, I was really nervous because I've seen ambassadors before, and I've never seen one with a disability, at least one that's visible, right? So I'm like, I'm probably not going to get it. But then again, she was accommodating me, and that says something about like the actual boss, like if she's trying to accommodate me, then perhaps the boss has also talked to them about like students with disabilities in the past, and like perhaps, hey, maybe in the future you're gonna have someone with a disability, just try to accommodate them, right? So I'm like, you know what, I want to see if they will hire me, right? And they did. And when I first went to, training for the ambassadors, I met my boss. He is now my former boss. I'm so sad about that. But as soon as I met him, like I mentioned, he accommodated me. He would print out information in large font. The meetings were supposed to start at 5, but it's okay. He told me, don't worry, Perla, because I will accommodate you, and we're going to start at 5:10, 5:30. It doesn't matter. We're going to get you set up. And I'm like, well, I'm going to be a tour guide, and I need to be outside in the sun, and I have albinism. How are you going to help me with that, right? He made sure I got the tours early in the morning, like 9 a.m. He also gave me the tours that started at 4:30 p.m. That way, like, I was not in the middle of the sun or anything like that. He gave me a hat to wear on tours, which that was sort of allowed, but not really. But he's like, no, Perla, you can do whatever you want. Just make yourself feel comfortable. And I appreciated that. And that's why I stayed with them. So that was very different from them in a way. I guess because I'm still a student. So maybe that's why, because, it's a little bit different for me. But with that, I mean, if I'm being honest, I'm like their only, ambassador that you can tell that has like a visible disability. And when I tried out for director of morale with them, again, I had my doubts. If I'm being honest with you guys, I am still not comfortable with like me disclosing my disabilities, which is kind of ironic because it's out there, like you guys can see it. So yeah, I mean, I'm rumbling right now, you guys. I'm just nervous, but my advice is just, like he mentioned, if they're gonna be willing to go above and beyond for you to accommodate you, then that's the right place for you. If they're not gonna do that, then probably they're not worth it. So just keep looking for it. You'll find your own Kyle Perkins. That was the name of my boss. Yeah. And I found another Kyle who was not able to be with us today. Yes, he's an amazing boss too. So maybe whenever I graduate, maybe if I get a chance to have a job with him, right? But that's for the future. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you, Perla. I wanted to mention that, in the spirit of disclosure, I had an interview a long time ago when I got out of law school, and it was a panel interview with a bunch of people on the other side of the table. I think it was like 10 people on the other side of the panel, and it was a job to be an investigator for the OCR, Department of Education. And I don't know what possessed me to go do that, but it did. I was just kind of interested, and it was kind of interesting to me. And they asked me this question because, I came in with my cane, right, And sometime after 2 or 3 basic questions, they said, so how are you planning on getting to work every day? This is New York City, Manhattan, And I remember I had gotten some pretty decent coaching from a friend of mine. who had been a recruiter in his previous life. And I remember relaxing, taking a really deep breath, and I remember saying, I think the building had an entrance when I came in. And they just kind of looked at me like, oh, yeah, it does, yeah, you know. Anyway, it broke the ice, and the questions after that did not relate to whether I was blind or not. They just started asking me all kinds of questions about my experience and all of that. So the next question that they put in here, and you know, the experience of applying and searching for work is a real serious one. It takes a lot of concentration and effort when you have a disability. I think it takes concentration and effort for anybody with or without a disability. It's a tough 40-hour-a-week job if you really take it seriously. And it's very involving, and it can be very hard-hitting emotionally, physically, you know. So the only quick piece of advice I can give about that, given my little bit of experience, would be that, you know, you need to relax when you're doing it. Don't sweat the process. You know, don't get so anxious that you become overwhelmed and you forget to really read about the employers you're researching and who you want to apply for jobs with, because you can't just go and apply blindly to any work just because you look to be qualified for it. You really have to look hard at what you're doing and why you would want to work there. It's a legitimate question to ask yourself and ask the people when you get a job interview, why would you want to work there? Ask yourself that question. And that's going to bring you to a lot of questions you can ask when you're being interviewed, you know? They start talking about and marketing themselves during the job interview. They always do that. But that gives you an opening for you to say in very, perhaps more like what Perla is saying, you know, more diplomatic language, you know, you're asking questions that basically say, why do I want to be here to begin with? What kind of a boss am I going to work for? You got to ask all those questions. Okay, so the next question that they have is how can we determine, or how can you determine if an employer is going to be inclusive? Now that's a really broad type of question, but I think that there might be some hints when we're looking at jobs. So, Marina, you want to try it?
Absolutely.
How an employer should be inclusive.
Yeah, so as Perla said, as Cornelia said, I mean, you know, how do they treat you at the very start of the interview, right? If they're not going to be accommodating, if they're not going to be, I mean, Perla had a really good, experience, but not all organizations are ready or prepared for individuals with disabilities. So if you see that they're not making those accommodations, or maybe they're not prepared, but they hurry up and figure it out and they do what they can to accommodate you, that's going to be best, right? That's what you're looking for. And I just wanted to piggyback on what Perla said, is that if they're not willing to accommodate you, right? She had a wonderful experience, but if they didn't accommodate, please call us, right? That's what we do. As an applicant, they have to accommodate you. If you need an accommodation at the application stage and they refuse it, that is what we're here for. So that's just a little side note. But if you're looking at these positions, I had a case, and it still bothers me to date. The individual utilized a wheelchair, went in for, was obviously very well qualified, got called for the interview. And when they showed up for their interview, they noticed that people were just keep passing by. They never called him for the interview. So he got a little nervous, and he was very observant, and he noticed everybody passing by, took note. And then they said, oh, we're going to have to reschedule it. The HR person is busy. And so they ended up rescheduling. They never actually rescheduled. So he felt like it was because he utilized a wheelchair, and they got nervous, and they didn't know what to do, and they panicked. And so when we went and did the interview, we found out that the HR person was there. He described the individual to the T, and we found out that that person was back and forth and was actually there and chose not to interview him, and I guess got nervous. And it's like, okay, do you really want to work there? No, but also you should file a charge, right? Let us know, because that's a major problem. So if you see that there are these questions that are being asked that shouldn't be asked, if you see that they're not making the accommodations, know that they need to make those accommodations, yes, it's not a place that you want to work, but EEOC wants to know because going forward, we want to make sure that other individuals get those opportunities. So if they're making those exceptions and they're giving you the accommodations you need, or at least they're open to that, that's going to be the first clue to inclusivity.
I was thinking about kind of like jumping to different places so we can kind of keep it exciting, because this has been really cool so far. Cornelius, I was thinking about sort of a similar question, only let me add a little bit more to that. They were asking me to kind of throw out a question about what kind of support, have you found, for instance, in your experience, I guess, when you're looking for work and then getting on, doing the onboarding process once you got a job offer, once you got the job, what kind of advocacy did you find? And then what kind of support were you able to find? And how did you find it? How did you learn about any type of supporting services?
One thing I always utilize is the human resource department with any employer. And so if you need an accommodation, speak with the human resource department. They can find out what accommodations are available, or they can connect with an agency that can assist you. And when I'm looking for an employment opportunity, like Diego's saying, Google is an amazing tool. A lot of companies now have DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion departments that work with individuals with disabilities, as well as different races, age, and backgrounds, and things like that. So make sure these companies, or some of the large companies, if you can, do some research and find out if they have diversity, equity, and inclusion departments. And if they do, that means that they're open to finding people with different backgrounds. So that'll be a great way to start when you're applying for a job. And once you're in there, once you get your foot in the door, if you do need an accommodation, I've always worked with Texas Workforce Solution, Vocational Rehabilitation Services, VRS, Workforce Solution has navigators as well. Houston, we are blessed to be in Houston because there's so many different resources out here for people with disabilities that we can reach out to. No matter what your disability is, there's an agency that can assist you finding a resource to help you be able to make an accommodation at that job. No matter what the job is, if you need an accommodation, if you're working on a computer and you need certain software or programs, contact a Workforce Solutions Vocational Rehabilitation specialist and let them know I might need this accommodation. And they can be in contact with your employer, and they can assist your employer with getting whatever you may need. If they are fortunate enough to allow you to work for the company, then they are also fortunate enough to allow you to get the opportunity or get the resource that you need to do the job that they hiring you to do. So if they want you there, they'll make the accommodation to keep you there. And employers, like a lot of employers that I worked with in the past, know that the turnover is expensive. And people with disabilities have the tendency to work longer with companies, so they're going to want to keep you. So if they have to make these accommodations to make sure that you stay there, then they're going to make these changes. So don't be afraid to tell your employer, hey, I need this for my computer, or I need this kind of chair for my desk. And it'll be cheaper to get you that assistive technology tool than it will be to hire somebody else or to train them to do the job. So once you get in there, you in there. So they'll tell them, hey, this is what I need. And they might not get you exactly what you need, but they'll try to get you what works. So once you're in there, have great communication with your manager and supervisor and let them know what your needs are. And they'll try to be accommodating as possible.
Okay, I'm going to make it really exciting now. And I'm going to ask this question to Marina last. So I'm going to ask Cornelius and Perla first, but there's a madness to my madness in wanting Marina to answer it last, and she'll understand why. The question is, how would you deal with a question asking about your disability on an online form? And let me give you an example. A question might say something like, do you take any medications that might affect your ability to perform essential job functions. Or another question could be a simple checkbox on a form that just says, do you have a state driver's license? Now, for people like me who are blind, I don't drive. I can't check that box. The problem I have with that question, and I'll just kind of mention it, is how do I know that they're going to see the application and review it if I don't check the box, right? Because if I check it, what did I just do? I'm lying on an affirmation form. That's the legal term of it, right? Mm-hmm. You don't want to lie on application forms. What you want to do is, decide how to best approach the question. So let me start with Cornelius on that tough one. What would you do, Cornelius?
If I have a question that is asking in particular about, or they're asking information that will either exclude me for the opportunity. If, for instance, let's say go with the driving example. If they're asking about a driver's license and I don't have one, I would just leave it blank. So if they have a question about it, they can ask me about it later, like, I see you didn't mark that you don't have a driver's license. And I can ask them, is that a necessary requirement for the position? But I'm gonna fill out as much as I can that applies to the job that I'm applying for. And if it's unrelated, because I'm sure there are probably other questions that's unrelated that's not required, so I'll just answer what is related to the job that I've applied for. And what's not, I would just skip it and go on to the next.
Perla, the same question. Have you come across a question like that before? How did you handle it if you did? Or how would you handle it if you see one? Now, it could be any kind of a leading question. It may not be directly asking, but it might eventually basically force you to disclose having a disability, or maybe you start thinking, I do take a certain XYZ medication. So in other words, how would you handle it?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I've never come across this question, and like I mentioned before, I have low vision impairment, I have albinism, so I'm legally blind, meaning like you, I cannot drive. And again, I'm always about being 100% honest, and if it was mandatory for me to check that box, I would definitely say no. And a lot of the times there's common questions towards the bottom, so I will it's a really tough question, so thank you for that, because I love challenges. But to be honest, I would probably do the same thing that Cornelius would do, because, you threw me off. Honestly, I don't know what to say. When I applied for my job, it was not there. But then again, it was for a school, related job, here on campus. So honestly, I don't know what I would do.
You know what? This is why you're here, to learn, right? Aren't we?
Yeah.
Marina, what do you think? What are your thoughts on it?
I'm going to help you, Perla. You may run across questions that are not okay on an application, and you don't answer that question, right? Because as Cornelia said, if they ask for a state-issued ID, is different than a driver's license. Right? If that job requires driving, then I can understand why they would need the driver's license. If I'm going to be a cashier and I'm not driving anywhere, or if I'm going to be an investigator and I'm not driving, so when you see these things and maybe you see something that just has a pause, right? That's why you always want to ask questions and know. There are certain points in the application process, there's a point in the hiring process, there's a point in the employment process, when they can ask you questions about your disability. How much information is going to depend on where you are in the process. At the very early stages, it's very limited, right? The only thing that they need to be concerned about is, can you do the essential functions of the job? Are you qualified for the job, and can you do the job? That's it. Very limited questions. Can they ask you about a need for accommodation? Hey, these are the essential functions of the job. Are you able to do that? You say yes or no, and then you move on. Going in depth, asking you about medical information, that early on is going to be a problem. The further you get into the process, they can ask you a little bit more questions. But again, it's going to be very specific to the job, the essential functions of the job, and the disability. So you might have multiple disabilities, But you don't need to identify all, only the one that you need the accommodation for, right, if you're further along in the process. And so seeing those questions, a couple of things. If you see it's a red flag, please contact the ERC because we want to know about those applications. And I've had people say, hey, they asked me this question on the application. They'll send it to me, and we start asking a lot of questions. Policies are not always updated. Applications sometimes need to be updated. So if you see something, say something, let us know, because other people might not have, right? As Perla said, I don't know what to do. And so we want to make sure we're making that right. And EEOC can force them to get those applications updated, to get the policies updated. So there's potential to see questions on an application that you shouldn't see. If you do see those, please, please let us know.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
That's great.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, and I want to point out that the ADA Center gives technical assistance on this all the time, and they're consistent with EEOC guidance. So you can call us as well and tell us what your problem is or what you discovered. You know, usually I end up telling people that the more examples you have of applications such as that, the better it makes your case to go to the EEOC and let them know about it, especially if you're applying with the same employer over and over again. Say you're applying with a large corporation, you know, and you keep running into this and you're worried that your form is just not being looked at. Well, we encourage you to do something about it. Don't just take it, you know, and be depressed about it. You need to just call or do some research, go to EEOC, call us. I mean, eventually we'll tell you to go to EEOC if you want to file a complaint, right? But, you know, they're very helpful at the EEOC. They do answer questions. And so it'll help you at least kind of get some guidance on how to proceed on a tough question such as that, because the questions can be very, very hidden. I'll give you another example. An example of it would be, have you filed for workers' compensation claims in the past 5 years? That is a really tricky, and I'm going to say it, nasty question in my personal view. That should not be on an application form because it can disclose potential medical information, the fact that you might have been in the hospital after a workplace injury, you know, and that's just not very fair during the application process. Like Marina said, once you get a job offer and you go through the onboarding process, now they can ask you questions that have to be, you know, related to the job. They have to go to business necessity to ask you those questions. You know, and then you'll decide if they are appropriate questions, and you'll know how to respond better. So the next exciting question on my list has to do with modern day technology like LinkedIn, Indeed, Career, Monster. You know, they're all starting to get into all these video interviews now and these chat bots. When you apply for a job, it's all automated. And I'm going to say, Marina, a few words. The EEOC is prioritizing investigations that relate to so-called AI, artificial intelligence, employment processes, including recruiting, and as well as on the job. So what we're talking about here is you go and apply for a job, and this chat box comes up, and they tell you, we're going to ask you some questions now that you can answer freely in the chat box, right? And that's wonderful, except that you might come across a question that just pops in and says, have you had any mood changes in the past week? I actually saw that in an article. Somebody got that question, and I think they actually filed a claim with the EEOC on it. Another question had to do with workers' comp. And the problem is that you got to answer the question somehow because it's automated. You can't log off. If you log off, you lose the session. You got to start all over again, right? So these are very difficult situations for individuals with disabilities. Okay, so the question that I came up with was, have you guys come across a system that wants you videotape you answering a few questions? The questions are going to be canned, right? They'll prepare the questions. Hopefully, they might relate to the job you're applying for, but sometimes they don't. They might ask you something else, like, what kind of a hobby do you have? Anything like that. So have you guys had a video interview question? How did you handle it? Did you feel it was fair? Did you have trouble with it? How did you feel about that? How did you handle it? Perla.
Okay, we are really getting into these tough questions now. No, I've never had any of these type of interviews. Yeah.
They're coming. I'm warning you.
Thank you for the
You
warning.
know, they're coming. And, you know, a lot of people get nervous because they start thinking about, oh, gee, what should I wear? Should I wear a suit? Should I, you know, do I put on makeup? What am I supposed to do during a video? And really, there's no way to know. I would recommend doing a lot of research online before you put yourself through a video type of situation where you're going to be videotaped. Hopefully, you'll know ahead of time. Sometimes you don't, by the way. The chat box might say, we have video capability and we would like to videotape you during some answers. Do you approve? Do you give consent? So think about that, folks, okay? Cornelius, what do you think? How would you handle this?
I've had a few video and audio interviews, and which I had one about maybe about 7 months ago, and I was applying for a job to be a transcriptionist. And as a transcriptionist, I think it was like a communication company. And I realized how terrible I am at transcribing what someone said. They was like, yeah, you know, we're gonna record you and we're gonna just listen to you talk, and I want you to type everything that they said. So as I was typing and they were looking at me, just became nervous because I was gonna work for a communication company. And I think I had to do maybe 100 words per minute. And I did so bad that the lady didn't even want to continue with the interview. She was like, okay, that was fun. All right, well, we'll call you when it's over. And I realized that under those pressures, I wasn't really ready. So I think I didn't do well, but to get the job with NASA, I did have another video interview, which I think I did really good. So it could go either way if you're prepared for it. I was prepared for NASA. When they called me, I was ready. But when this transcription, I was like, you know, it was something to do. You know, I didn't have nothing else going on, so I wasn't as prepared. But if you're prepared and you have the tools, and I have a lot of stuff, computers and everything, because I'm a techie at home, so I have what I need to be ready for something like that. But if you're not ready, I think it's unfair to put you in that type of position. And that's where I also shout out to Workforce Solutions, because we have a lot of computers over at Workforce Solutions. If you need to go over there and utilize their software and tools, you can take advantage of that as well.
It's a fascinating topic, isn't it? It's also a very difficult one. I typically, you know, advise people not to do video interviews or chats if they can avoid it. If there's another way of dealing with the application process, I usually encourage that. If you have a type of disability or significant disability, or maybe not so significant, that you think is going to compromise your ability to do a video chat or a chat, you know, question and answer session, because maybe you're slower in responding to the questions. And by the way, these things tend to be timed.
Oh, yeah.
And they really will cut you off. This is one of the reasons why the EEOC is investigating these, because they're supposed to provide accommodations for that. But anyway, my point is that I recommend against doing those, but if you don't have a choice, you're going to have to get ready. And as Cornelius and both Perla mentioned, you need to seek help from people that have been helping you with your job searches and advocating for you. And that brings me to the question of basically that has more to do with more of a personal approach. You know, how have you advocated for yourself in terms of, you know, when you ran into a problem, whatever it was, whatever it might have been relating to employment, how did you decide to deal with the problem, to try to address the issue, whatever it might be? Let me ask Perla that.
Okay, my turn again. Well, in terms of my job, what I do is essentially just give tours and work like major events for incoming students. And a lot of this involves like guest facing and, you know, promoting the University of Houston and all of that. And sometimes you have parents who parents are tough, okay? Like, and that's coming from, you know, I am the middle child and the only daughter in there, and like at home, my parents are tough on me. So when I'm speaking to parents of other students, it's scary, just saying. And sometimes they have like really tough questions, and sometimes it's a little bit hard for one, them to understand that I'm just a student, and two, for them to understand that maybe it'll take me just a teeny tiny bit longer for me to like get to them and like their answer, you know, especially if it's like in a situation where I'm outside and like it's really, you know, like sunny, and maybe I take a few more minutes to like get someone to help them out. And that happened to me on an occasion when I was giving a tour, and it was really tough. I went back to my boss, and I didn't know what to tell him because I didn't want him to think that because of my disability, I couldn't do my job. And I spent 5 minutes outside the office thinking, what am I gonna say? Because towards the end of the tours, I always have to say, if you like the tour, please leave a review. So what I started to say instead is, if you didn't like the tour, forget you met Perla, okay? But that was before I figured this out. So I spent 5 minutes outside the office just thinking, what can I do? So I went to in the end I decided, you know what, let's be honest with my boss. I told him about it. He's like, Perla, you shouldn't have had to face this, you know? And so he contacted, like, you know, the person, you know, number one, saying, oh, I apologize if you had a bad experience. But like, he stood up for me, you know? He told, because apparently she was mad when she was typing this review. And so he talked to the parent. He kind of apologized, but in a way, he was doing it while standing up for me, you know, saying, you know, you also have to understand that Perla, you know, even though she has a disability, towards the end of the day, she was able to do her job and help you, you know. Maybe it wasn't like as fast as you wanted for her to do it, but she helped you out. And he was there for me. I cried for like 2 hours in his office, but he was there. He listened to me. And, you know, that's for my job. For those of you who don't really know me, I tend to have the tendency to say sorry a lot. And that's something that I used to do to my boss a lot because, you know, I was always scared of like doing something and like doing it wrong and them thinking like, oh, because of her disability, right? And so I would say sorry a lot. And he told me, Perla, if I hear you say sorry again, I'm gonna be mad. You need to stop saying sorry. You do not need to be sorry about anything. You need to embrace your disability because it is not a disability. Think about it as an accessibility. And so I was like super happy when he told me that. He's like, you know, think about your disability as rather something that makes you stand out, you know? Because on tours, you know, it's harder for people to remember my other ambassadors, and it's easier for them to remember Perla, you know? Like, oh, the albino girl who was super sweet and hyped, and she was doing the most to help us out, you know? And he helped me with that. I haven't said sorry like a lot lately. That was him. Also my professors. Professor Daniel Peter Kennedy, he's my English professor. He's helping me with that again. He's also helping me with getting more used to my, you know, just get more comfortable, you know, with advocating for myself, which I'm still working on that. Kyle is also helping me from Dart Center. All of the people from, like, all of the workers at Dart Center are also helping me. So thank you guys for that. They've also advocated for me, not just in the classroom, but also like in terms of for work. I always have Gracie. She works with Dart Center. She's always asking me, do you need help with anything? You know, how are you doing? She always has a snack for me, you know. I love food. So, you know, just overall, I talk a lot, you guys. Maybe that's why I'm teaching and learning, right? But overall, I'm still working with advocating for myself, but I'm glad that I have people in my life, not my former boss because he left, but I still talk to him, and he still helps me with like embracing my disability. I have Kyle. I have, you know, Dart Center, EOS, Career Services. I have a community here at University of Houston, and I'm happy to be here with you guys today. Thank you.
I think Perla's going to become a real diplomat in the future. I need to ask my timekeeper to tell me how we're doing on time.
It is just about 1:35. So we have a little bit of time. We want to wrap up another question, and then we can open it up to Q&A with the audience.
Do you want me to go through some audience questions?
Audience, do we have any questions? It looks like you're welcome to.
Don't be shy.
I'm transitioning because of my disability. I haven't had it. I've had it for a few years now. but I'm finding it hard to transition into another type of position. I'm at a loss. I worked in the oil and gas field, but I don't know what else I can do other than that.
Cornelius, you want to take a crack at it?
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit, what did you do in the oil and gas?
I was an NDT inspector.
Okay. What we try to encourage people when you're trying to change job opportunities is to, if you can't do what you used to do, try to figure out what you can do now. So use some of the experience that you have and see how it can translate into other jobs. And I would recommend you you can go into Indeed and type in whatever kind of job that you had before and see what other opportunities come up. It may not be the same type of job, but let's say if you want to look up inspector, you can type in inspector and see what other kind of inspectors that they have, other things that you might can do.
The only problem with that is the inspection that I was doing required a lot of my vision, and now I'm legally blind, so
Yeah.
that's kind of out of the question.
And another thing, like utilize the resources that you have in the community, like vocational rehabilitation service and definitely workforce solutions. You can visit one of their offices and speak with one of their counselors, and they may can guide you in any other jobs and see how that job, what you did before, can translate into another type of job that you could possibly do. And with a vision impairment, it may be a little more challenging for you to jump into something, especially if you needed your vision to do what you've been doing all that time. So you may have to do something completely different, and you may have to get into another trade. But go into visiting Workforce Solutions offices and speak with one of the counselors, whichever location is close to you, and let them know what you were doing, and they can probably help you navigate into what you want to do or what you can do.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other questions? Not right now?
Nope.
Okay.
Right now.
Sorry, go ahead. What?
Not right now. Go ahead.
Okay. So basically, I wanted to ask Marina, can you tell us a little bit about has the EEOC gone into any type of, I guess I want to say progress, maybe not be the right word, with regards to all these automated interviewing systems, and have you guys had an increase in complaints? I hear there's been a little bit of an increase in complaints about that, but I know that just looking into it, it's sort of a new priority, right? About a year or two old?
Yeah, you're correct. So EEOC basically started to see, okay, so we saw this AI thing and it was of interest to us, but what we found was that maybe not necessarily on purpose, but maybe some on purpose, where we started to see that it was negatively affecting individuals with disabilities. Like you said, maybe it was timed, or these facial recognition, situations, it was not.
Yes,
really
unintentional, yeah.
Yeah, and so it had this kind of indirect effect, negative effect on individuals with disabilities. There is a whole bunch of guidance. One of our commissioners, Commissioner Sonderling, is that, that's his champion, this is the chair's priority. So everybody with the commission is on board on this information. And so there's a wealth of information at eeoc.gov on just artificial intelligence. I did a workshop over the summer specifically on AI. While the focus was on disability, what we're also finding is negative with race, right? Where individuals, if you're darker skinned, maybe the computer doesn't read you correctly. And so there's just so many things that I think people were not expecting, but the EEOC is on top of it. They're doing a ton of talks, and so we have a lot of free resources, obviously, at eeoc.gov, but we do a lot of webinars and a lot of sessions where public information, what are you seeing? What do we need to learn about? Because we're not seeing all of these things, and maybe sometimes people don't know that this is a problem. And so we have these open sessions with the general public to say, what's going on? What should we be aware of? And I think that's how that AI conversation started, of saying, hey, we saw this, or we recognize that. And so the chair has a wealth of priorities, but AI is a major thing on her priority. COVID, right? With COVID, we saw a lot of things with that. So as society changes and things evolve, we're trying to stay on top of these things, but also seeing how do they have these impacts on individuals in those protected categories.
Marina, as a follow-up to that, what would you recommend for people to do if they have a situation like that? How could they go to the employer? What would be the process to go to the employer and say, hey, I need an accommodation for this particular application process you guys have?
Yeah,
Like they can say, I can't really go through it without getting failed during the chat or whatever.
That's a great question, Diego.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I certainly highly recommend is that point of contact that you have that's scheduling the appointment or scheduling the interview with you, reach out to them, but document, right? Email, something, some form of documentation where you put it in writing that you're requesting this accommodation, because you can say you asked for it, but how do you prove that you did? So I like email, I like that documentation. You can show that they got it, when they maybe send it to where you know that they checked that box, or when you get their email receipt back that they received it. And so that's your way of documenting, but you just let it be known. If they start to ghost you and they don't call you back, and now all of a sudden, they're putting you off, then you definitely want to reach out to us, right? But you make the effort. You're your own best advocate. You know what your disability is and what exact accommodations. Not every accommodation. So a person with disability, say for example diabetes, you can have 5 people with diabetes. Every single person is going to have a different situation or a different form or a different need for accommodation. Be your own advocate. Know what you need to do, but always, always, always document, right? Put things in writing, email as much as you can so that you can have that information. Because then they can't say, well, we didn't know, you never asked, but here's the email, right? Or something. But let somebody know, and you follow that process. You're not in the organization, so I can't say go to the policy and find out who it is. That's your one source of point of contact, utilize it. And if they don't accommodate you, contact us. If you're within the organization, look at your policy, look at your employee handbook. Where do you go? Disability Resource Center, HR, wherever you need to go internally, utilize those processes. You want to give them the good faith effort to do the right thing, and if they don't, know that you've documented and now you have EEOC to come back to.
Very good. I was thinking of mentioning that, I'm a former user of, or consumer of TWC services, which used to be known as DARS, the Texas Commission for the Blind, longer, beyond that time. And then they became DARS, Department of Assistive and Rehabilitative Services. I used to serve on the on the DARS Council appointed by the governor when they were DARS. And one of the things I always advocated for people that are looking for work or working with their counselors on career development and so forth, especially, with a disability and going through rehab services, is be assertive, be critical when you're working with all these different parties, with all these different people that you work with. Like Marina said, you gotta let HR know that you're having a problem. And I like what Perla said earlier, take a direct approach, just go for it. Don't mince words, don't wait around, don't think that not asking the question will make it better next time or it'll go away, because you're likely to run into it again, But when you're dealing with advocacy services, any type of, vocational rehabilitation, the counselors, the technicians, the people that provide all these services for people with disabilities, if you're a consumer, you have rights, but you also need to be critical and very, very focused on what you want and what you're going after. If you call a counselor, a VR counselor, and you're not really sure what you want, it's not that they're not going to help you, it's just that it makes their job a little bit more difficult because they're having to guess. So it works better when you're focused and you're thinking, I'd like to work in this area. I want to focus, I want to retrain myself to work in this field, because I can't do what I used to do before. So I just thought I would mention that because it's a whole global picture that you have to be inside of when you have a disability and you're trying to look for work and get hired and go through the onboarding process and get that first job offer, as it were. One question I was thinking about.
Quick pause. We have a couple of questions from the audience. Would it be all right if
Yes,
we answer some audience
sure.
questions?
Go ahead.
So there was one question from the audience about medication. So what if, because of the medications you're taking, if it comes back in a drug test or something like that, that there's concerns from an employer about being able to do your job based on the medications that you're taking? How might you handle something like that?
Cornelius, you want to try it?
With that, generally the drug tests will test for certain things in your system. So that would, I don't think employers should know exactly what type of medication that you're taking and how it affects your job. So I'm not too keen on that. So I don't really have much information, but I don't think an employer would know about the medication that you're taking unless you tell them. Because that might not come across on a blood test or it comes back on your drug screening. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, let me just add a little
Marina.
bit to that. Yeah. So hopefully this is after the job offer is made, right? Because it has to be after a job offer. It can't be before a job offer. So you go in for the screening, right? Sometimes they ask for a drug test or some physical. And it might ask what what prescription medication are you taking, right? So maybe somebody is on something. We've had people who are on, maybe methadone or something of that sort, right? It's for, treatment or something. And so they will put that on there, and then all of a sudden, no one wants to call them, or the job offer is rescinded. I've seen that before. And so if you're identifying and it's prescribed, it should not be used against you negatively. Now, if they have a concern, right, in this particular case, maybe they did have a concern, but they should have interacted with that individual and asked questions. Are you able to do the job? We noticed this. The only time that I think that might be a potential question, or maybe a bona fide occupational requirement, is if you're driving, right? So maybe the Texas Department of Transportation has some rules or guidelines, but it shouldn't be used against you negatively, especially if it has no, anything to do with the job. So if now all of a sudden you've identified, I take these prescriptions, and you go take the test, and they don't call you back, is that a area of concern? That might be a regarded as case, right? They're treating you as an individual that has a disability. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. And I've actually established violations as an investigator where that has happened, right? And the person did take a medication, it was prescribed, they rescinded the job offer, they admitted that it was based on the medication, and the EEOC established a violation because that is not okay. Right? We have to have this conversation, and that allow the individual to have the conversation and say, I only take it at night, I only take it on the weekend, whatever it is. But again, very specific information, not a lot about the background of that, especially if it has no effect on the job.
Any other questions from the audience?
Yes, I have one question.
Sure.
This is Soha again. I wanted to know if you guys can discuss some of the benefits, are there benefits for disclosing your disability? Like, are there benefits as an individual with the disability to disclose your disability?
Sorry, I had an echo. You're asking if there's benefits to disclosing?
Yeah, so I mean, I know a lot of employers want to hire a more diverse group of individuals. So as an individual with a disability, is it maybe a good idea to disclose at times?
So could you mean maybe possibly some kind of maybe like a little affirmative action type of program?
Sort of, yeah.
Or
yeah.
more like the open kind where it's not really an affirmative action, but it's encouraged? Both?
I guess both, yeah.
Marina, what do you think about affirmative action programs
I'm
and
still in
programs?
No, you're good.
Yeah, thank you, Cornelius.
Let me mention
Please.
one quick thing.
Yeah.
There are sometimes you go to an employer's website, especially the large corporations. A lot of them have disclaimers that say, if you have a disability, feel free to disclose and let us know, and so on and so on. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that is completely up to the individual. You're not required, right, to disclose the disability. So you don't have to if you're not comfortable with it, because that is up to me, right? It's when I decide to disclose that I have a disability. No one else should put that on you. And so if you're comfortable and you want to identify as an individual, go right ahead. But also keep in mind, knowing your rights, knowing your roles, protections, right? All of these things that come with that. Because in some situations, unfortunately, disclosing that information leads to, right, where they start treating you differently. maybe they're asking for the right reason, but just be prepared. Are there benefits? There could be benefits, right? If you needed accommodation, yeah, you have to disclose the disability in order to get that. But are there going to be positions where they're looking to hire a person with a disability? Are there, like the government, right? So government, federal government, we do what we call Schedule A hiring, where an individual has a specific type of, or there's a list of disabilities where they want to hire individuals with that disability. And so in that situation, yeah, if it gets you on the list and you can say, yeah, I have this disability, they're not gonna ask you a lot of background details, they'll ask you just basics. But if it doesn't seem to have a job necessity and you're not comfortable with it, then I would say don't do it until you're ready to make that identification.
Yeah, and I'm a agree with Marina as well. If it's a part of a opportunity for you to get your foot in the door, especially when I applied for the position as a regional navigator with Workforce Solutions, they weren't particularly looking for someone with a disability, but they were needing somebody who would go out and build a relationship with the people with the disability in the community. So I knew my disability would come in handy because of my experience working with people already with disabilities. So I was happy to say, hey, I'm a person with a disability, and I could go out into the community and work with people with disabilities. So at that point, it was advantageous for me to do so. So I was happy to do it. Even with the position with NASA, I was a Schedule A hire. So me being a special appointee, it was advantageous for me to say, hey, I'm a person with a disability, you want to hire me? And they were like, yeah, you would do. And so I'm there. So sometimes it could be advantageous, and if it's not, if you having a disability has nothing to do with you doing the job, then it's like Marina saying, it's up to you. So.
Did you go through a Schedule A program, Cornelius, yourself?
I did, yes.
You did?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there you have, folks, somebody who's gone through the process. I don't get to meet too many people who have. I mean, I'm sure many people have. There are many thousands of people with disabilities who have gone to work for the federal government under the Schedule A authority. That's what they call the selective placement program, by the way, right, Marina?
Right.
I think, yeah. It's called selective placement. You might see it on the applications. And so if you're willing to disclose and you feel comfortable and you look at the job and you think it's something you might want to do, then go for it, It can only help because I think it gives you extra points, right? No, it puts you in a non-competitive status, I believe.
Right.
It takes you out of the main applicant pool and it puts you into the internal applicant pool, so to speak. So if I remember the process correctly, I spoke to the OPM a long time ago about it.
Yeah, you're correct.
Yeah. Anybody have any follow-up questions, anything?
I think we have time for about one more question before we start kind of giving some closing remarks.
Okay.
And final advice.
Right.
Any final questions? It's quiet, so I'll turn it back to you.
All right. Parla, did you want to mention anything about disclosing a disability? You mentioned it, but what do you think about disclosing when you apply for a job?
Well, I didn't really talk about my disability until I was in the interview, because
Right.
that's when they got to see me. And in terms of disclosing my disability, well, I'm still nervous about it. I don't know if I can give you any sort of advice because I'm still dealing with that myself. But like they mentioned, well, if it's going to help you, then for sure. And, if you feel comfortable, because this is all about feeling comfortable. If you're not comfortable in doing something in terms of disclosing your disability, then you shouldn't have to. And they shouldn't force you to do it. It's something that you, it's just something that you're I feel like in a comfortable work environment where, I feel like if I say something, about my disabilities, it's not gonna, hold me back from getting that job at the end of the day, But that's all I can say. I mean, my disability, I didn't really say anything about it until the interview. And I got lucky with the UH ambassadors. But if I'm being honest, I'm still nervous about it. I don't know, whenever I graduate and I'm in that interview process again, I honestly don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know if I don't know if I'm going to wait until the very end, until the interview process to tell them hey, I have a disability, or if I'm going to do it straight up. I honestly don't know. And I'm happy that I attended this event, you know. The advice you're giving,
I'm
Diego,
learning something
it's
new,
really,
so.
really good. You guys
Yeah.
also. I'm learning a lot. I'm just a student here, and honestly, wow. Like, the advice that they're giving you guys, and I'm getting it, like, up here as well. Thank you so much.
You know, I have to say, it really, the crux of the biscuit, as I heard it say, is that disclosure is, there's no yes or no answer to it. You really have to go with the moment, with what's going on, and why you need to or why you shouldn't have to. Are you obligated to do so? Are you not obligated to do so? Is it because you take a medication? And like Marina mentioned, is it job necessary to disclose that a particular medication makes you drowsy so you won't be able to drive when that happens? If the job requires driving, right? During the job, you're going to have to disclose, or during the onboarding process, you're going to have to mention it because it will come up in a drug test. And then voluntary disclosures, when you're applying, you know, online, for example, most of us apply online nowadays, they can't see you. They don't know what you look like, or they don't know who you are, that you have a disability, whether it's obvious or not, they can't see it. So you got to make that decision. And I usually tell people not to disclose. That's my advice. That's my personal experience-based opinion on that. Only because you're applying because you have the skills, education, and training or experience to go for the job. Otherwise, why would you be applying for it? Yeah, you could be applying for an entry-level job, sure, but you still have some qualifications that you're going to put there. That's why you're applying for an entry-level position. But you're always applying because of your experience, who you are, your knowledge, your education. You're not applying because you have a disability or because you don't. So keep those things in mind. I think that we're pretty much going to wrap up then.
That's right. We have some time if y'all would like to go around and maybe share some final advice for our listeners today.
Good idea. I like that. Some final advice. Cornelius, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. I'm going to speak a little bit first about advocacy. Sometimes you have to be your own advocate, and to be your own advocate, you have to know what you need and what you want. One of the strongest advocates I had was my sister growing up. She was what I would describe as an aggressive black woman because she doesn't play about her little brother, and I've been in a wheelchair since I was 17, so if we go somewhere and something wasn't right, she would act a fool. She would go off, and she'll tell you how you would think she was a lawyer the way she would act like, this is illegal. She has no legal experience at all, but she act like she did, and she was able to convince the other people, like, you know what, we shouldn't be doing this. So she showed me that you could be your own advocate and stand up for yourself and talk loud and be angry about something that you know is not right. And she got me stuff that I probably shouldn't have gotten, like, you know, like they just go, here, get them out of here. Here, take this TV and go on about your business. So she showed me how you can stand up for yourself and be able to stand on what do you want and what do you need. Because there are certain things that you require as an individual with a disability. And there are certain minimum things that you need. So make sure you know what you need and be able to speak up for yourself. And another point I want to talk about is the importance of relationships. I think people undervalue relationships when it comes to looking for jobs. Every job that I've gotten ever since I was 17 has come from me knowing somebody. So when someone says, yeah, it's about who you know, that is true because you have to know somebody. And a lot of times, let me make a call. Even the job that I had with NASA, somebody called me and said, hey, they hiring at NASA. Do you want to work there? Sure, that's cool. But that's because I know somebody. You got to know somebody. So go out and make relationships, build networks, get people to talk about you looking for a job. And lastly, make sure your reputation is good because nobody's going to refer you if you have a bad reputation or you have a bad attitude. So work on your reputation and your attitude, and people feel good about referring you to different job opportunities. So 1, be able to advocate for yourself. 2, make sure that your reputation is good. And 3, build a strong network. Have good relationships that'll be successful throughout the life. Don't just have relationships for today, but make sure these relationships be of value to somebody else, and they'll be of value to you. And you would never know where that next opportunity will come from. So make sure you have strong relationships. That's it.
Perla, what do you think? Some last pieces of advice.
Well, I mean, Cornelius already said anything. How can I compete with that?
I love picking on you.
You do. You're my favorite person, for the day. Probably the life. You know, probably for life, because trust me, I will never forget this moment. Yeah. And thank you for picking on me, you know, because I love to talk. But anyways, my advice is, you know, don't be afraid to speak up. You know, kind of like him, like he was talking about advocating. Well, same thing. Don't be scared to speak up for yourself. And that's something that, like I mentioned, I'm still working on that. I'm still working on standing up for myself. Don't be afraid, because what's the worst that can happen? You know, just do it. Don't be scared. And you know, talk to people, like he mentioned. Make friends. Yes, all the friends that I have, my job, attending the University of Houston, everything is because I talk to people. I got my job because I talk and talk and talk, and there's no one to stop me, you know? So just talk to people, make friends, build those relationships like he mentioned. And, you know, opportunities are out there for you to take them. They're everywhere. Just hold on to them, grab them and don't let them go. Because, you know, you never know if that opportunity is going to come back around and knock at your door twice. Maybe it'll only knock once. And you have to be there, prepared to open that door. That way, you take hold of that opportunity, and, you know, maybe more opportunities will come from that opportunity that knocked on your door. And, you know, you don't want to miss that opportunity. And that's what happened with me when I was applying for universities, and later when I was applying for my job, you know. And that's all I can say, honestly. Like, Cornelius, you did an amazing job. Like, hey, what can I say, you know? And I personally thank you so much for those words. Like I mentioned, Diego, I will not forget what, you know, the advice he's saying. I will not forget your advice as well. And I cannot wait to see what Marina has to say next. I'm excited.
I don't know how to follow all of this, right? This is a lot. And as Cornelius said, and I'm just going to add to it because there's not a lot left to say, but I will say this, right? You find the thing that you're most passionate about. There is something out there for everybody. Find your strengths, right? If you have a disability, you have more abilities than you do a disability. Find those strengths, find your passion. But more importantly, just to add to what my friends here said, when you get to where you're going to get, right, and you're loving your life and you're loving your job and you found your passion, share that with others. Find somebody else that might be struggling, that has a disability, has the same disability. Get involved and help somebody out, right? I don't have a disability in this moment, but I found great joy in helping individuals in the community who feel that based on race, religion, color, sex, national origin, age, or disability, that they've been discriminated against. And I get to go there and help them. I get to go now to the organization, because we're neutral. I get to go to organizations before they get in trouble and say, hey, listen, look at your policy, because this could be a problem. EEOC can come knocking on your door. It could cost you some money. And so now to go out and train and educate the public on both sides is just phenomenal. So being able to advocate for others, once you've gotten to that point, share your experiences, share your knowledge, share your insights, because to help others is where it's really at. Find your passion and then share your passion with other individuals. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Can I add something?
That's great.
See what I told you? That was some great advice. Thank you.
So I hope you guys kind of learn a little bit more insight on this little process, which is little process. Must be my personal joke there. Okay. So, this is, everybody has such a different point of view on looking for work and eventually finding a job that they can live with. And sometimes it's a job for necessity, economic necessity. Sometimes it's because you just want to do something different. It depends. You know, the great job resignation is what they're calling it now. Since the pandemic began, a lot of people have had second thoughts about where they were working, and they're saying goodbye to their jobs and moving on to bigger and better things according to how they feel. And I think the important lesson there is that many people out there have finally realized that they decided, I'm not going to be here stuck in this job and be abused anymore. They decided, I'm not going to take it anymore. This is not for me. Done it 15, 20 years, maybe longer. I think it's time to move on. And they're doing it. Sure, they might be economically capable of doing it. Many of us are not able to do that. But I just want to point out that the process can be very overwhelming. And I want to encourage you, take it from one with experience. I mean, I've been discriminated against many, many times throughout my life. And I've been to law school. I graduated in law school in 1999, to give you an idea. And many law firms rejected me because I was visually impaired or blind, period. I mean, I knew that for a fact. The minute they met me, they were scared. They just didn't know what to do with me. They were so uncomfortable. I kind of felt sorry for a lot of them. It was so uncomfortable. But anyway, long story short, the point being that I didn't let it get me down. Yeah, it might have gotten me depressed for a day or two, but after that I moved on. You really have to consider doing it that way because it's a difficult process. But you know what? It's a challenge. It's a great challenge. It's a project. And when you take it on as a project, it starts to look very different. When you start using Google the way you're supposed to, do your searches. Don't limit yourself to simple words. Use all kinds of words to look for things. You're going to understand a lot more. You're going to get a lot more insight. And then you come to events like this one, produced by all the people that have been doing this, and they're going to be talking in a minute. You learn a lot, and you meet people, network. So I encourage you to keep doing it. Don't worry about your disability. It's part of living. Everybody can join the disability community at any moment. And that's just a fact of life. And if you're new to it, welcome. I congratulate you. If not, then be sure to share your experiences and wealth of knowledge with everybody. And I want to thank everybody for listening to us up here. I think we had a great panel, so another round of applause for the panelists. And I'll pass the microphone on.
Thank you, Diego. Can we give a round of applause for our moderator as well? Okay, thank you all so much. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, our moderator, for being here. This was really helpful and wonderful information. One of the tips you all heard today was networking, so we've got time for just that now. So please stay around, meet some new people, maybe meet with our panelists. And with that, thank you all for being here and for enjoying this day with us and celebrating disability employment today. So thank you.
skill